I used to think love could fix anything, that if you just gave enough of yourself, your time, your patience, your heart, you could heal whatever was broken. I believed that about my marriage, about motherhood, about myself. I believed it most of all about Rose. When I first met her, she was 5, tiny, serious, holding a stuffed rabbit by the ear like it might run away if she let go. Her father, David, had taken me to the park where she liked to play. It was early spring, the grass still damp from rain. I remember standing there, nervous, trying to decide whether to wave or speak or just smile. I'd never met a child who'd lost her mother before. What do you say to a girl who already understands that the world can take from you without warning? David crouched beside her and said softly, "Rose, this is Clara. She's my friend." She didn't answer right away. She just stared at me with those huge, wary eyes, like she was measuring how safe I was. I crouched too, meeting her level. "Hi, Rose," I said. "That's a beautiful bunny you have." She gripped it tighter. "He's scared of strangers," I smiled. "That's okay. So am I." It was such a small thing, but something shifted. Her shoulders loosened, just a little, and I knew I'd been granted a fragile kind of permission to try, to stay, to love. Over the next few months, I learned that grief doesn't leave quietly. It clings. Rose's sadness came out in tantrums, in silence, in the way she'd flinch when someone said her mother's name. But I didn't run. I read bedtime stories until my throat went hoarse. I sat beside her during thunderstorms when she couldn't sleep. I memorized the sound of her breathing when she finally did. When David proposed a year later, it felt natural, inevitable. We married in his backyard under fairy lights strung between the trees. Rose wore a little white dress with lace sleeves and called herself the Flower Queen. During the reception, she clung to my side and whispered, "I wish you were my real mommy." I nearly cried right there. From that day on, I raised her like she was mine, not because I wanted to replace Elise, her mother, but because love doesn't know how to stop halfway. David was kind but distant. The sort of man who thought providing was the same as parenting. He worked long hours, always traveling, always tired, so most of the time it was just Rose and me. We built our life out of routines: Saturday pancakes, library trips, matching pajamas at Christmas. Every year, she'd leave a handmade Mother's Day card on my pillow and pretend it wasn't from her. My favorite said, "You're not my first mom, but you're my always mom." I thought those words would be enough to carry us forever, but time has a way of changing what love looks like. When Rose turned 16, the distance began. It started quietly. The slammed door, the missed dinners, the cold silence that settled between us like fog. I told myself it was normal. Teenagers pull away. They need space. But this was different. This felt like erasure. I still remember her 16th birthday. I spent the morning baking her favorite red velvet cake from scratch, piping the frosting just right, wrapping a silver necklace engraved with her name. I imagined us laughing, maybe having one of those rare, gentle talks that only happen when she lets her guard down. Instead, she came downstairs with her phone in hand and said flatly, "I'm going to Aunt Lydia's. She's taking me shopping." I froze. "Oh, I didn't know you had plans." "She texted me last night," she said with a shrug. "I made your cake," I said softly. "Maybe we can have dinner later?" She gave me a faint smile, polite, dismissive. "We'll see." Then she walked out. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched cake until the frosting began to lose its shape. When David came home, I told him what happened. He just sighed and said, "She's a teenager, Clara. Don't take it so personally." But I did. How could I not? That night, I saw the photos online. Rose beaming beside Lydia, holding a cupcake with 16 candles. The caption read, "Birthday magic with my girl, our family first." That hashtag hit me like a punch to the chest. Family first. As if I had never been part of it. I didn't cry. I just scraped the cake into the trash, quietly, slowly, like I was burying something sacred. After that, everything changed. The hugs stopped, then the good nights, then her voice. Rose moved through our house like a ghost, present but untouchable. If I tried to talk to her, she'd give one-word answers. Fine. Busy. Later. I kept showing up anyway. I stocked her favorite snacks, waited up when she went out, left notes in her backpack. But every attempt was met with indifference, and then came the words that broke something inside me. One evening, after she came home late, I said gently, "You could have called." I was worried. She looked at me, calm, detached, and said, "You don't have to wait up, Clara. You're not my mom. Not angry. Not cruel. Just factual, like she was correcting an error." I froze. All those years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, homemade lunches, and whispered lullabies, wiped away in 6 words. I wanted to remind her of everything I'd done, of the nights I held her through nightmares, of the times she'd clung to me when she was scared. But I knew saying it would sound like begging, so I said nothing. After that, I started shrinking around the house. I moved quietly, avoided her room, stopped suggesting family dinners. I deleted the Mom and Me playlist we used to sing in the car, and still, David said nothing. He had a talent for absence, physically, emotionally. Whenever I tried to talk about it, he'd say, "She'll grow out of it," or, "You're pushing too hard." But I wasn't pushing. I was barely even there anymore. The moment that finally shattered me didn't happen in private. It happened under the fluorescent lights of Rose's school auditorium, in front of a crowd that applauded while my heart quietly broke. It was her senior year. I found out she'd been nominated for a leadership award, not from her or David, but from a neighbor at the grocery store. "You must be so proud," she said, smiling as she packed my groceries. I smiled back, pretending I wasn't hearing it for the first time. At home, I asked Rose about it. She blinked, indifferent. "It's no big deal, just something at school." But I showed up anyway. I wore a navy dress I hadn't touched in years, printed her nomination letter, and arrived early enough to get a good seat. I saved one for David, though he texted an hour before that he couldn't make it. Work, of course. When Rose's name was called, I stood and clapped harder than anyone. She walked up, poised, beautiful, her hair shining under the stage lights. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was one of those turning points people talk about. The kind that heals. Then she began her speech. She thanked her teachers, her friends, even Lydia, my mother's sister who's been like a second mom to me. My heart twisted, but I kept smiling. Then she paused, looked out at the crowd, and said, clear as glass, "And to the people who raised me, who showed me the kind of woman I never want to become." A few polite laughs rippled through the audience. I didn't laugh. I couldn't even breathe. I sat there frozen while the applause swelled again. She went on speaking, her voice steady, her smile radiant, like she hadn't just erased me with a single sentence. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember driving home. I just remember walking into the kitchen, seeing her award certificate on the counter beside an uneaten sandwich, and realizing that everything I had built, 15 years of devotion, sacrifice, love, had been reduced to nothing. When David came home later, I told him what she said. He rubbed his temples and muttered, "You're overreacting, Clara. She's under pressure." Pressure. That's what he called it. I went to bed that night and cried into my pillow until the sun came up. It wasn't just humiliation, it was grief. Not for a child I'd lost to death, but for one I'd lost to choice. Something in me broke quietly that night. A thread I didn't even know had been holding me together finally snapped. After that, I moved through the house like a ghost. I still cooked, cleaned, folded laundry. But I stopped hoping, stopped waiting for kindness. I became invisible by design. Then came the night I finally left. Rose had brought a few friends home. They were laughing, tossing their shoes by the door. I was sitting at the dining table sorting through old paperwork, medical bills, my mother's will. I asked them gently to put their shoes away. One girl rolled her eyes. Rose said nothing. They went upstairs, laughter echoing down the hall. A few minutes later, I heard her voice drifting from her room. "She's just some woman my dad married." "It's not like she's family," it was said casually, without malice. That made it worse. I stared down at the papers in front of me, my mother's handwriting looping across a page, and thought of how she used to say, "You may not have given her life, but you're the reason she has one." And yet, in my own home, I was no one. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and opened the drawer where we kept spare keys. I picked up the ring with a tiny pink heart-shaped tag. Rose had chosen it when she was 12. I slipped it into my pocket, walked upstairs, and found David in bed scrolling through his phone. "David," I said quietly, "we need to talk." He didn't even look up. "What now?" "I can't do this anymore," he sighed. "She's just a teenager, Clara." "This isn't about Rose," I said, louder this time. "It's about you. You've let her treat me like I'm nothing. You could have stood up for me. You could have told her I mattered." He set his phone down, finally looking up, annoyed. "What do you want me to do? Force her to love you?" "No," I whispered. "Just remind her that I loved her." Silence. Heavy, final. I realized then that I had been fighting alone for years, for love, for respect, for acknowledgement, and I was exhausted. I packed a small bag that night, a few clothes, a folder of important papers, my journal. I didn't touch the wedding photos. I didn't leave a note. When I walked out, the house was silent. The porch light flickered as I closed the door behind me. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before starting the engine. I waited for panic, for regret, for some last-minute reason to stay. None came. I drove to my sister Margaret's house 2 towns over. When she opened the door, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into her arms and said, "You stayed longer than anyone else would have." I cried then, not for David, not even for Rose, but for the years I'd lost trying to be enough for people who never tried for me. Margaret made me tea and tucked me into her guest bed with floral sheets and a view of her wild backyard. I barely slept. The next morning, the silence hit me like a wave. For the first time in years, no one needed me, and it terrified me. The days blurred together. I didn't eat much. I didn't shower unless Margaret reminded me. She brought me breakfast, tried to coax me into short walks. "You're grieving," she said. "Don't rush yourself." And she was right. It was grief. The grief of losing a child who hadn't died but had turned away. The grief of losing a marriage that had quietly expired. The grief of losing the woman I used to be. I'd built my life around caretaking. Without it, I didn't know who I was. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the bathroom staring at my reflection. My face looked older, not from time, but from effort, from years of trying to hold everything together. I didn't cry. I just looked at the stranger staring back at me and thought, so this is what disappearing looks like. That night, Margaret brought me soup. She sat on the edge of the bed and said softly, "You've got to start doing small things for yourself, Clara. You don't have to be fixed. Just start existing again." "I don't know how," I said. "You will," she said. "You were someone before them. You'll be someone after." Her words didn't heal me, but they planted something, a quiet seed of belief that maybe, someday, she could be right. The days that followed were slow, colorless. I started journaling again. The first entry was just one line. I was never enough. I stared at it for a long time, wondering when I'd started believing it. But then, gradually, small things began to shift. One morning, I made coffee before Margaret did. Another, I stepped outside for a short walk. I noticed how the wind moved through her trees, how the sunlight filtered through the leaves. The world kept turning, even without me holding it together. It was humbling. It was freeing. I was beginning to understand that rock bottom isn't loud. It doesn't come with screams or shattering glass. It's quiet. It's the sound of your own breath when the world finally stops demanding things from you. And in that silence, I began to hear myself again. It happened on a gray Wednesday afternoon, one of those forgettable days that still end up changing everything. Margaret had left a plastic storage bin by the door with a sticky note that said, "Sort through this when you feel ready." It was filled with old sweaters, receipts, and a small jewelry box I'd almost forgotten about. I almost didn't open it, but something told me I should. At the bottom of the bin, under a stack of unopened mail, I found an envelope. Heavy, cream-colored. No stamp, no return address. On the front, in soft blue ink, were 5 words that made my breath catch. "For Rose, when she's ready." The handwriting stopped me cold. I knew it instantly. Elise. I sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in my hands. Elise, Rose's mother. The woman I had spent half my life trying not to compete with. The woman who had loved first and left too soon. I should have sealed it back inside the bin, called David, done the respectable thing. But something inside me, maternal, aching, told me I needed to read it. Not for curiosity, for understanding. Maybe, just maybe, it would help me make sense of what had gone so wrong. I slid my finger under the seal and unfolded the paper. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, full of grace. My sweet Rose, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there. And that breaks my heart more than I can say. I wanted to see you grow up, to see who you'd become. But if I can't be there, I want you to know this. Don't let grief harden you. Don't shut out the people who try to love you, even if they're not me. If your father meets someone kind, someone patient, let her in. Let her brush your hair. Let her love you. That won't erase me. It will honor me. And to that woman, if you are reading this, thank you for loving my girl. Be gentle with her. Her pain will come out in ways you won't understand. But underneath it all, she's still that little girl who clutched my necklace when she was scared. Please remind her she's not alone. With love, always, Elise. By the time I reached the end, I was sobbing. Not the quiet kind of crying I'd gotten used to, the kind that leaves you hollow, but deep, guttural, almost sacred tears. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Elise hadn't seen me as competition. She had chosen me, trusted me, believed I could love Rose in her absence. I sat there for a long time, the letter pressed to my chest. Everything that had felt heavy inside me, the guilt, the self-doubt, the need to be enough, it all loosened, just a little. I hadn't stolen anything from Rose. I had given her everything Elise had hoped someone would. When I finally looked up, the sky outside had started to clear. Pale sunlight filtered through the window, soft and hesitant, like a benediction. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from sadness this time, but from something gentler, something that felt like peace trying to find its way back in. I reread the letter until I could almost hear Elise's voice in my head. Be gentle with her. The next morning, I made coffee early. I opened the windows. I sat at the table with a pen and a blank sheet of paper and wrote the first thing that came to mind. I want to feel like a whole person again. That was it. Not revenge, not reconciliation, just wholeness. Later that day, I took a walk around the block. The air smelled like rain, and the trees were beginning to bloom. I saw a flyer taped to a lamppost, Help Wanted at Willow and Finch bookstore. I took a photo of it on my phone. I hadn't worked since Rose was 10, but for the first time in years, the idea didn't scare me. It felt like a door quietly opening. When I told Margaret that evening, she smiled through her tea. It's about time, she said. You've been keeping your soul on layaway long enough. I laughed, a real laugh, the first in months. The next day, I called the bookstore. A soft-spoken woman named Karen answered. I told her I was calling about the part-time position. She asked if I had retail experience. I said, no, but I've spent 20 years keeping a teenager alive and managing chaos with a smile. She laughed. That's better than half the resumes I've seen. Can you come in tomorrow? For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. Yes, I said. Yes, I can. When I hung up, Margaret clapped her hands. See, she said. Told you the world wasn't done with you. The following morning, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing a blouse I hadn't worn in years. My reflection still looked tired, but there was something new in my eyes. Light, maybe, or courage. I wasn't sure yet. At the bookstore, the scent of paper and coffee hit me the moment I stepped in. Shelves stretched to the ceiling, soft music humming in the background. Karen, a woman with kind eyes and a silver braid, shook my hand warmly. It's not fancy, she said. Just shelving, helping customers, keeping things tidy. But we're like a little family here. That word used to hurt. Family. But this time, it didn't. It just felt distant. Like something I'd once chased, but no longer needed to define me. I started working 3 afternoons a week. The rhythm was gentle, sorting books, chatting with customers, recommending stories I loved. There was something healing about being surrounded by other people's words when mine still felt fragile. I began to remember how much I liked being alive in small ways, through stories, through kindness, through purpose. At night, I'd come home tired but peaceful. Margaret would ask about my day, and I'd tell her about the regulars, the man who always bought biographies, the teenager who whispered poems into her phone. Ordinary people, ordinary moments, but they grounded me, and every night before bed, I'd take out Elise's letter. Not to reread it, just to hold it, to remind myself that someone, somewhere, once trusted me with something precious. Weeks passed. Slowly, life began to expand again. I opened my own bank account. I learned how to pay bills online. I donated half my clothes, cleaned out my phone contacts, started saving for my own apartment. Each tiny act felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Margaret noticed the change. "You're getting lighter," she said one evening on the porch. "You don't flinch when her name comes up anymore." I think I finally realized, I told her, that I don't need closure from them. I needed it from myself, and it was true. I had spent so long begging to be seen that I'd forgotten how to see myself. Still, there was one thing left undone: the letter. Elise's letter to Rose. I kept it tucked safely in my journal, waiting. Waiting for what? I wasn't sure. Courage, maybe, or clarity. Part of me wanted to send it right away. Another part hesitated. Rose's words still echoed in me like scars. "You're not my mom." But I knew the truth now. I didn't need her to call me Mom. I just needed her to know I had loved her exactly as Elise had hoped someone would. So I waited, not out of fear this time, but out of respect. Because love, I was learning, wasn't about fixing or forcing. It was about timing, and one day, I would know when the time was right. It took me weeks to decide, though I knew all along that the moment would come. One morning, I woke up to soft sunlight on my face, and the answer was simply there, quiet and sure. I didn't need Rose to be ready. I needed to be. I took Elise's letter from the journal, smoothed its folds, and read it one last time. The words no longer felt like a plea for forgiveness. They felt like a bridge between what was and what could still be. I slipped the letter back into its envelope and added my own small note. "Rose, this letter isn't from me. It's from someone who loved you before either of us knew how to explain what love meant. I never tried to replace her, only to honor her. Clara, no return address. No signature flourish, just truth, unadorned and enough." I mailed it that afternoon and didn't tell Margaret. I didn't check my phone, didn't pace or rehearse responses. I had already made peace. Whatever came next wasn't about mending what was broken. It was about letting the truth find its way home. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. It was Rose, a simple message. "Did you read it?" My pulse stayed calm. "Yes," I typed back. After a pause, she wrote, "You weren't supposed to." I took a breath before replying. "I didn't plan to, but it found me." And maybe it was always meant to. Another pause. Then, I didn't know she felt that way. No one told me. Why didn't he show it to me? There it was. Hurt, confusion, the faint trace of regret. I didn't answer her question. I wouldn't turn this into blame. Instead, I wrote, "I'm just glad you know now." She didn't reply again. And for once, that was enough. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need her to rewrite the past. The simple fact that she'd read her mother's words, and mine, was all the closure I'd been searching for. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. Official stationery, gold crest at the top. It was from the school board. They needed to verify a recommendation I'd written for Rose months before, the one for her scholarship. I'd forgotten all about it. They enclosed a copy of her application essay. As I read, my hands began to shake. It was beautifully written and entirely fictional. She'd painted me as a controlling woman who resented her, who stifled her ambitions. I barely recognized the person on those pages. For a long time, I sat there staring at the words. Then I took out Elise's letter, made a copy, and enclosed it with my reply. I didn't defend myself. I didn't accuse her. I simply wrote, "I don't wish to damage her future. I only want to protect my name. Please make your decision based on honesty, not resentment." 2 weeks later, I saw the announcement online. Rose's name had been quietly removed from the finalist list. That night, she posted on social media, "Some stories fall apart when the truth gets told. That doesn't mean they weren't real to us. It wasn't an apology, but I understood what she meant. The story we'd shared had been real, even if it had broken us both. After that, the world grew quieter. I threw myself into my work at the bookstore. The rhythm soothed me. Shelving novels, chatting with regulars, learning the names of the authors who spoke to people when life didn't make sense. Karen offered me more hours, and I said yes. My co-workers began to feel like a new kind of family, gentle, uncomplicated, free of history. They didn't know my full story, and that was fine. They knew enough to treat me like someone who mattered. One afternoon, a teenage girl came in with her mother. They were arguing softly about a reading assignment. "It's stupid," the girl muttered. "Books are boring," her mother sighed. "You used to love stories," I smiled at them. "I used to say the same thing," I told the girl. "But one day, a book made me feel less alone." "You never know which one will do that for you." She blinked, half amused, half curious, and picked a book off the shelf. Her mother smiled at me in quiet gratitude. After they left, Karen said, "You have a gift, you know. People listen when you speak." I didn't say anything, but I felt the truth of it. I'd spent years speaking to walls. Now I was finally being heard. As weeks passed, I noticed how much lighter I felt. I wasn't waiting for a phone call or replaying old scenes. I wasn't rehearsing pain. I was living. Then, one rainy afternoon, I got a message from David. Just 2 words. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. A few days later, he showed up at Margaret's house anyway. She called softly from the hall, "Clara, he's here." He looked smaller somehow, older, defeated. "I didn't know about the letter," he said quietly. "I thought I'd lost it. I didn't think it mattered." "It mattered," I said. He nodded, eyes lowered. "Rose, she's been asking about you. She won't admit it, but she's confused. I think she regrets how things went." I folded my arms, not out of anger, but self-preservation. "She doesn't have to regret it," I said. "She just has to face the truth." He hesitated. "Would you talk to her?" I thought for a long time before answering. "I'm open to listening," I said. "But I'm not stepping back into the role she pushed me out of. I can't fix what she broke." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw understanding flicker across his face for the first time. "You look different," he said softly. "Stronger. I am." That night another message came. This time from Rose, just 5 words. "She believed in you." I didn't. No apology. No explanation. Just truth. The kind that's heavy, but healing. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then turned it off. I didn't need to respond, because sometimes the act of being seen, even briefly, is enough to close a wound. The weeks rolled on, steady and quiet. I kept working at the bookstore, saving money, making small plans. I found an apartment with a window that faced the sunrise. I bought a second-hand chair and a kettle. I learned how to make peace with solitude. I didn't get the storybook ending, no tearful reunions, no grand apologies under rain. But I got something better. Stillness, clarity, self-respect. I had peace. Now in the mornings, I sit by my window with a cup of tea and watch the world wake. Sometimes I think of Rose, of the little girl who once called me Mama Clara, and the woman she's still becoming. I wonder if she ever rereads her mother's letter at night. But I don't wonder if I mattered. I know I did, because I was there. Through every fever, every heartbreak, every moment when love demanded showing up, even when it wasn't returned. I was constant. I was kind. I was home. And that's the thing about truth. It doesn't need to be shouted. It doesn't need everyone to believe it. It just needs to live quietly inside the person who earned it. I didn't steal her future. I protected it. And in doing so, I found my own.